All right, diving in today, we've got excerpts from I Go to New York. It's more than just a travel story, though. We're going to peek into someone's experience with language learning and how they, well, kind of grow as a person in a whole new place.
That personal touch is what makes this deep dive so interesting. It's not just textbooks, right? It's about emotions, how people connect when they learn a language.
Exactly. Our main character, Maria from Spain, arrives in New York City. You know, that classic mix of excitement and nerves. I bet anyone who's learned a language somewhere new knows that feeling.
Absolutely. The text really captures that sensory overload of a new city, the size, the constant noise, the crowds. It's like you're hit with a wave of language you can't quite understand yet.
The text, Stevie says, the city was big and noisy, which I'm guessing doesn't even cover it. But one of the first things, she meets her roommate, Anna, from Brazil. They're both learning English, and boom, instant connection.
That shared experience is so powerful for learning a language. Studies actually show that having a supportive group, especially when facing a new language and culture, makes a huge difference. It keeps you motivated and helps you bounce back from tough stuff.
So like they've got this instant little support group, right? Then, day one of English class arrives. And as Maria's walking to school, she's already taken it all in. Street vendors, people rushing, tourists taking pictures. It's like a real-life vocabulary lesson happening before she even gets to class.
And then the classroom itself, it's like a mini United Nations. Students from Japan, Mexico, Egypt, all want to learn English, but they also bring their own cultures to the mix. It makes you realize language learning is about way more than just the language.
I love this little detail. Their teacher, Mrs. Parker, believes in practice over perfection. She wants them to embrace their mistakes, which is so important in language learning, right? It's easy to get stuck trying to be perfect all the time.
Yeah, it's about switching your mindset from being scared of messing up to enjoying trying things out. Mrs. Parker's way actually fits with the idea of comprehensible input, a key concept in how people learn languages.
Okay, hold on. Break that down for us. What is comprehensible input?
Basically, it means learners need to hear and read language that they mostly understand, even if it's not grammatically perfect. That's how you start to absorb the rules and how the language works. It's about being okay with things being a bit messy while you learn.
That makes sense, like learning to swim. You don't start doing every stroke perfectly. You jump in and figure it out as you go. Speaking of figuring things out, the text describes some of Maria's early chats with classmates. Like, she talks with Hiroshi from Japan about where they're from and what they want to do. He's into anime, she wants to be a writer. It reminds us that language learning is about real people and their hopes and dreams, not just grammar drills.
Exactly, and it shows that language is a tool to communicate and connect. We even see it in a simple moment, like Maria and Anna having dinner. Pass the salt turns into a mini lesson.
It's those everyday moments, right? They build up your fluency in a way textbooks never could.
It's called incidental learning, picking up the language naturally from everyday life, not just from studying. And those little wins, they can really motivate learners, especially when they're just starting out.
The text also shows Maria's struggles, but she's determined to get better. It's that attitude of, I'm going to figure this out. So important for anyone learning a new language. It's about pushing through and knowing it's okay to stumble along the way.
Speaking of stumbling, Maria and Anna both get jobs at a café. Classic immersion, right? You're forced to use English constantly and you get a real taste of local life. No more just textbooks and classroom exercises.
And what's a deep dive without some good stories? The text mentions Maria forgetting sugar in someone's coffee, a relatable mistake. We've all been there. But is a fast-paced job like that really good for every language learner? It seems like it could be overwhelming, especially when you're just starting.
That's a good point. It wouldn't be the best for everyone. Some people would thrive in that sink or swim situation, while others might get too anxious. The key is finding the level of immersion that challenges you but doesn't make you want to quit. But for Maria, it seems like the cafe job forces her to use what she learned in class.
Totally. Verb tenses, prepositions, they're not just abstract concepts anymore. They're tools she needs to take orders, make coffee, chat with customers.
Exactly. It shows how important it is to learn in context. Seeing how grammar and words work in real life. Conjugating verbs on a worksheet is one thing, but using those verbs to get someone their morning coffee is a whole other level.
Yeah, it definitely makes it all more relevant. And speaking of real-world connections, there's this guy in the text, Mr. Johnson. He's a regular at the cafe, always orders black coffee and a newspaper. And Maria starts having little conversations with him.
Those random connections can be amazing for language learners. It's not just transactional language anymore. It's about building a rapport, sharing a moment, feeling like you belong in this new place.
Those little chats can be so validating, right? You feel like you're actually communicating, not just reciting memorized stuff. And the text really emphasizes how those cafe interactions make the grammar lessons click for Maria.
It's bridging that gap between the theory and the practice. It shows that language learning isn't just about gathering knowledge, it's about developing skills and confidence by actually using the language.
So it's not all work and no play for Maria. The text describes how she starts spending her weekends exploring the city, Times Square, Central Park, the Museum of Modern Art. It's painted with these vivid details, like she's really soaking it all in.
It's almost like the city itself becomes another teacher. The sights, sounds, energy, they all contribute to her learning experience. It goes beyond just the language and taps into the richness of the culture.
And it's not just passive exploration, right? She's reading English books, watching movies with subtitles, engaging in that self-directed study that goes hand in hand with her lessons.
It sounds like she's really taking charge of her learning and looking for opportunities to practice. And then there's this great scene where the school has a cultural exchange day, and Maria gets to share some of her Spanish culture. I love that she brings Tehran sweets to share. Small detail, but it highlights how cultures in even the everyday stuff. By sharing those bits of her culture, Maria makes the learning experience richer for everyone.
Oh. So she's gone from student to teacher in a way, right?
Mhm.
Sharing what she knows and loves. And it's not all about structured learning either. The text talks about Maria going to a flea market and chatting with vendors. Perfect example of how even small interactions can boost your confidence.
Those little wins are so crucial for language learners. It's about stepping outside your comfort zone and realizing, hey, I can actually communicate and connect with people in this new language. And it's not just about language progress at the flea market. Maria finds an old Pride and Prejudice book, a book lover's dream come true.
Okay, that's awesome. Those unexpected joys, those little discoveries, they make the whole process so much more rewarding. But let's talk about something maybe a bit more intimidating. The text mentions Maria joins a book club, so she's combining her love of reading with her language goals. Wouldn't that be scary for someone still learning?
That's a great question. It could definitely feel overwhelming for some, especially if they're worried about keeping up with the discussions or understanding everything. But I think the key is finding a group that matches your level and interests. The text emphasizes how supportive and welcoming this book club is, so that probably helped ease Maria's anxiety.
So not just about reading the book, it's about finding that community and feeling comfortable enough to jump in. And Maria seems to be embracing those challenges head on. There's this moment where she actually argues for the importance of language learning during a debate in class.
Such a powerful shift. She's gone from a hesitant student to someone advocating for the transformative power of language learning. Shows how much her confidence has grown. Now she sees language as a tool to connect with the world, not just get by.
It's like she really gets the value of what she's learning and isn't afraid to say it. But it's not all debates in classrooms. The text has this heartwarming scene where Maria and Anna are making empanadas together, this moment of celebrating and reflecting. But they also talk about their dreams to the future. Anna wants to go into marketing. Maria still wants to be a writer.
I love that. It shows learning English isn't just a means to an end for them. It's become part of their personal goals, part of who they are. They're not just learning a language, they're building a life in that language.
Okay, we've talked a lot about Maria's experiences and progress, but I think it's important to mention that the text really brings New York City to life. There are beautiful descriptions of iconic locations, like the sensory overload of Times Square, the peacefulness of Central Park.
It's like the city itself becomes another character in Maria's story. The energy, the diversity, the culture, they all feed into her learning experience. It highlights how learning a new language is so often about so much more than just memorizing words and grammar rules. It's about immersing yourself in a new environment and soaking up all the cultural nuances that come with it.
And that immersion can happen in unexpected places. The text mentions Maria struggling to read a museum description in English. But then she uses that struggle as a chance to learn new words. It shows that active learning can happen anywhere and not just in the classroom.
Absolutely. It's about having that learner's mindset, recognizing that even tough situations can help you grow. Maria is clearly not letting the difficulty stop her. She's actively looking for ways to bridge the gap between what she knows and what she wants to learn.
Like, she's using the city as her personal language lab, constantly experimenting and pushing herself. But let's not forget about the people. The text really shows how important Maria's teacher, Miss Parker, is in her learning journey. She's patient, encouraging, and creates this safe space where mistakes are seen as steps forward, not failures.
Having that kind of support can make a world of difference, especially when you're starting out and self-doubt creeps in. Miss Parker seems like the ideal language instructor, knows how to build confidence, celebrate small wins, and help students enjoy learning.
And it's not just the teacher, right? Her classmates become part of that support system too. They practice together, help each other with tricky grammar, celebrate each other's successes. Reminds us that learning doesn't have to be a solo mission.
It shows the social side of learning a language, the power of community. It's about learning from each other, sharing tips, and creating an environment where everyone feels good about growing. Those shared experiences, those moments of connection, can be just as valuable as the actual lessons.
The text really captures those aha moments, those times when something clicks for Maria, whether it's understanding a tough grammar rule or realizing she can follow a whole conversation in English.
Those moments are like little bursts of motivation. They make all the hard work feel worth it and show you how much you're progressing. They make all the challenges feel worthwhile. But the text doesn't shy away from the tough stuff either. There are times when Maria feels frustrated, overwhelmed, even homesick.
It's that honesty about the ups and downs that makes Maria's experience so relatable. Language learning isn't always a smooth ride upwards. There are plateaus, setbacks, moments of doubt. And it's important to acknowledge that, to build up your resilience.
Exactly. And the text shows us that Maria doesn't let those tough times define her. She uses them to learn, to change her strategies, to ask for help when she needs it. And in the end, she comes out stronger. She's not afraid to ask for help, whether it's from her roommate, classmates, or her teacher. That willingness to be vulnerable is a big part of her growth.
I'm also struck by how the text portrays Maria's relationship with English. It starts as this foreign thing she's trying to decode. But as she gets better, it becomes less about conquering the language and more about making it part of her life.
It's like she goes from seeing English as a subject to experiencing it as a tool for connecting, expressing herself, and growing as a person. It becomes less about I am learning English and more about I am living in English.
And that change shows in how she starts using the language. The text mentions her starting to write in her journal in English, expressing her thoughts and feelings. That's a huge step.
It shows real ownership. She's not just repeating textbook phrases. She's using English to create, to reflect, to connect with her inner world. The language is becoming part of who she is, not just a skill she's learning.
We talk about how important culture is in language learning, and the text really hammers that home with all these little cultural details: Spanish festivals, traditional foods, the types of books Maria reads, even those Terran sweets she shares with her classmates.
It reminds us that language and culture are totally intertwined. Learning a language isn't just about the mechanics. It's about understanding the values, customs, and perspectives that shape how people use that language and how it works in real life.
And it's not just about absorbing American culture, right? Maria is actively sharing her Spanish heritage with everyone around her. It becomes this beautiful back and forth where everyone's learning from each other.
Exactly. It's not about assimilation. It's about celebrating different perspectives and finding those connections that go beyond language and culture.
But being immersed in a new culture doesn't mean it's all perfect. The text also mentions those times when Maria feels homesick, misses her family, and struggles with feeling out of place.
Those feelings are totally normal, and the task doesn't try to pretend they don't exist. It acknowledges the emotional roller coaster that comes with being in a new culture, where excitement and wonder mix with missing home and feeling disconnected from what you know.
But even when she's feeling vulnerable, she finds support in the connections she's made, whether it's Anna, her classmates, Mr. Parker, or even random friendly strangers who make her feel a little less alone in the big city.
It highlights how crucial those support systems are for dealing with the emotional side of language learning. It's about having people to share your doubts and frustrations with, people to celebrate your wins with, and to remind you you're not alone in this.
That sense of community can make all the difference. And the text does a great job of showing how Maria finds moments of lightness and humor, even when things are tough. There's this part where she tries to use a new idiom she learned, and the person she's talking to just stares at her blankly.
Oh, those moments are so relatable. It's like, wait, what? It reminds us that language learning can be funny, awkward, and full of surprises, and it's often in those unexpected situations that we learn the most.
It's about embracing those imperfections, realizing that making mistakes is all part of the journey. In the end, the text leaves us feeling optimistic about Maria's journey. It's not over, but she's come so far, and the possibilities seem endless.
It's a great reminder that language learning isn't about reaching a finish line. It's an ongoing adventure. And like any adventure, it's about the experiences you have along the way, the connections you make, and how you grow, both in terms of language and as a person.
We've really unpacked Maria's experience. We've seen the power of immersion, the importance of being okay with making mistakes, and the joy of unexpected connections. So what does all this mean for you, someone interested in learning a new language?
That's a great question. If you were Maria, learning a language in a new city, what would you be most excited about? Would it be navigating those busy markets, trying to order food in a local cafe, or maybe stumbling upon a hidden bookstore full of novels in the language you're learning?
Think about it. Let Maria's story spark your own curiosity. What adventures are waiting for you in the world of language learning?
Like, she's using the city as her personal language lab, always experimenting and pushing herself. But let's not forget about the people.
Right. The text really shows how important Maria's teacher, Mrs. Parker, is in her learning journey.
Yeah, she's patient, encouraging.
Creates this safe space where mistakes are seen as steps forward, not failures.
Exactly. Having that kind of support can make a huge difference, especially when you're starting out and self-doubt starts creeping in. Mrs. Parker seems like the ideal language instructor.
Really?
Knows how to build confidence, celebrate those small wins, help students actually enjoy learning.
And it's not just the teacher, right?
Right.
Her classmates become part of that support system too.
Yeah.
They practice together, help each other with that tricky grammar, celebrate each other's successes.
It reminds us that learning doesn't have to be this lonely thing.
Yeah.
It shows the social side of learning a language, the power of community.
Mm-hmm.
It's about learning from each other, sharing tips, creating an environment where everyone feels good about growing. Those shared experiences, those moments of connection, they can be just as valuable as the actual lessons.
Absolutely. The text really captures those aha moments.
Yeah.
You know those times when something clicks for Maria, whether it's understanding a tough grammar rule
Yeah.
or realizing she can follow a whole conversation in English?
Yeah, those are like little bursts of motivation. They make all that hard work feel worth it, and they show you how much you're actually progressing. They make all the challenges feel worthwhile. But the text also doesn't shy away from the tough stuff. There are times when Maria feels frustrated, overwhelmed, even homesick.
It's that honesty about the ups and downs that makes Maria's experience so relatable. Like, language learning isn't always a smooth ride upwards.
Yeah,
There are plateaus, setbacks, moments of doubt.
for sure.
And it's important to recognize those to build up your resilience.
Exactly. And the text shows us that Maria doesn't let those tough times define her. She uses them to learn, to adjust her strategies, to ask for help when she needs it. And in the end, she comes out stronger. She's not afraid to ask for help, whether it's from her roommate, her classmates, or her teacher. That willingness to be vulnerable is a big part of how she grows.
It's true. I'm also struck by how the text shows Maria's relationship with the English language. At first, it's this foreign thing she's trying to decode, but as she improves, it becomes less about conquering English and more about integrating it into her life.
It's like she goes from seeing English as a subject to study to experiencing it as a tool for connecting, expressing herself, growing as a person.
Right.
It becomes less about, I am learning English, and more about, I'm living in English.
I like that.
Yeah.
And that change is reflected in how she starts using the language.
Yeah.
The text mentions her starting to write in her journal in English, expressing her thoughts and feelings. That's huge.
It shows real ownership, yeah. She's not just repeating phrases from a textbook anymore. She's using English to create, to reflect, to connect with her inner world.
That's so cool.
The language is becoming a part of who she is, not just a skill she's learning.
We've talked about how important culture is when you're learning a language, and the text really emphasizes that with all those little cultural details. Spanish festivals, traditional foods, the books Maria reads, even those Taran sweets she shares with her classmates.
It reminds us that language and culture are totally connected. Learning a language isn't just about the mechanics. It's about understanding the values, customs, and perspectives that shape how people use that language and how it works in real life.
Yeah, and it's not just about absorbing American culture, right? Maria is actively sharing her Spanish heritage with everyone. It becomes this cool exchange where everyone is learning from each other.
Exactly. It's not about assimilation. It's about celebrating all those different perspectives and finding connections that go beyond language and culture.
But being immersed in a new culture doesn't mean everything is perfect. The text also mentions those times when Maria feels homesick, misses her family, and struggles with feeling like she doesn't quite belong.
Those feelings are completely normal, and it's good that the text doesn't try to pretend they don't exist.
Yeah.
It acknowledges that emotional roller coaster that comes with being in a new culture, where the excitement and wonder are mixed with missing home and feeling disconnected from what you know.
But even in those moments when she's feeling vulnerable, She finds support in the connections she's made. Whether it's with Anna, her classmates, Miss Hilaris Parker, or even those random friendly strangers who make her feel a bit less alone in the city.
It shows how important those support systems are for handling the emotional side of learning a language.
Yeah.
It's about having people to share your doubts and frustrations with, people to celebrate your wins with, and to remind you that you're not alone in all of this.
That sense of community can really make all the difference. And the text does a great job of showing how Maria finds moments of lightness and humor, even when things are challenging. Like, there's this part where she tries to use a new idiom she learned,
Oh, yeah.
and the person she's talking to just gives her this blank stare.
Oh, I can imagine. It's like, did I say that right? It reminds us that language learning can be funny, awkward, and full of surprises. And it's often in those unexpected situations that we learn the most.
Right. It's about embracing those imperfections and realizing that making mistakes is part of the process. Ultimately, the text leaves us with a feeling of optimism about Maria's journey. It's not over, but she's come so far, and the possibilities seem endless.
It's a great reminder that language learning isn't about reaching some finish line. It's an ongoing adventure,
Like that.
And like any adventure, it's about the experiences you have along the way, the connections you make, and how you grow, both as a language learner and as a person.
So we've really delved into Maria's experience. We've seen how powerful immersion can be, how important it is to be okay with making mistakes, and the joy of those unexpected connections you make along the way. So what does all of this mean for you, someone interested in learning a language?
That's a great question. Think about it. If you were Maria, living a new language in a new city, what's the one thing you'd be most excited to experience? Would it be trying to order food at a local cafe? Or maybe stumbling upon a hidden bookstore filled with books in the language you're learning?
Yeah. Imagine yourself in Maria's shoes. Let her story spark your own curiosity. What kind of adventures await you in the world of language learning?
Like, there's this one part where she tries to order coffee and she uses the phrase, hold the milk, but she accidentally says, stop the milk.
Oh, no.
And the barista just looks at her, all confused.
Yeah, those little mix-ups.
It's part of the learning process, right? You gotta laugh at yourself sometimes.
It's true. The text really emphasizes how Maria starts to see the humor in those situations. She doesn't let them get her down.
Exactly. It's about having a positive attitude even when you make mistakes.
It's like, you're going to mess up sometimes.
Yeah, you just gotta roll with it.
And I think that's a really important takeaway for anyone learning a language.
Absolutely. It's not about being perfect. It's about being willing to try to put yourself out there.
And Maria definitely does that throughout the text.
She does. She's not afraid to jump into conversations, even when she's not sure if she's getting everything right.
And that's how you learn, right? By actually using the language.
Exactly. It's like you can study all the grammar rules in the world, but until you start actually speaking and interacting with people, it's not going to fully click.
It's about bridging that gap between theory and practice, like you were saying earlier.
Right. And Maria's story really highlights that. It's about getting out of your comfort zone and just going for it.
And it's not just about speaking either. It's about listening, reading, writing.
Yeah, it's about using all those different skills to engage with the language and the culture.
And the text does a great job of showing how Maria starts to do that more and more as she gets more comfortable. Like, she starts reading English novels for fun. She even tries writing short stories in English.
It's so cool to see how she progresses, right?
Yeah.
It's inspiring for anyone who's on their own language learning journey.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think it also reminds us that language learning isn't just about acquiring a skill.
Right.
It's about expanding your horizons, connecting with new people, and experiencing the world in a whole new way.
Exactly. It's about personal growth, about becoming a more well-rounded individual.
And that's something that goes beyond just being able to speak another language.
It's about embracing new cultures, new perspectives, new ways of thinking.
And I think that's ultimately what makes Maria's story so compelling. It's not just about learning English. It's about her journey of self-discovery and how language becomes a tool for that journey.
It's a reminder that language learning is a journey, not a destination.
Yeah, you're constantly growing, evolving, discovering new things about yourself and the world around you.
And that journey is different for everyone, right? There's no one right way to learn a language.
That's so true. Some people thrive in structured classroom settings. Others prefer a more immersive approach.
But ultimately, it's about finding what works for you and sticking with it.
And being patient with yourself, right? It takes time and effort.
Yeah. You got to celebrate those small wins along the way and not get discouraged by the setbacks.
And I think that's a great message to end on.
Yeah.
It's about embracing the journey with all its ups and downs and finding joy in the process of learning and growing.
Well said. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a question. What part of Maria's journey resonated with you the most?
Yeah. Think about your own experiences with language learning. What are some of the challenges and rewards you've encountered?
And what are your aspirations for the future? What do you hope to achieve through language learning?
It's a journey worth taking, that's for sure.
Absolutely. So, go out there, explore, experiment, and embrace the adventure of language learning.